guys. So this podcast is a re-upload from a year and a half ago. I had PavvyG on, I think March of 2024, and we're having him on again. The episode's going to come out on Thursday. Stay tuned. But this is a re-upload from the podcast we did with PavvyG back in 2024. So I hope you guys enjoy.
We are back today with another Not My Fault Tennis podcast. I'm Jet, joined with my co-host Bobby, and we're joined today with a special guest, PavvyG. He's the
Very
vice chair.
special guest.
He's the vice chair of Rolls-Royce Tennis and a tennis vlogger who exposes corruption, propaganda, and bias in tennis. How's it going today, Pavvy?
Oh, it's been great. Great intro, and really good to be here with you guys. I know it's a relatively new podcast, and you're trying to get some great content out there. So, honored to be here, and hopefully we'll have a great chat about tennis.
Yeah. We've known Jason for a long time. So that's how we sort of even found your page. And I'm sure we'll get Jason on here eventually at some point.
Absolutely.
But yeah, we have a bunch of topics we want to get to. I mean, we're huge tennis fans, so I follow you, so we have I see your posts always on Twitter. I mean, you have a huge Twitter presence in the tennis realm, I guess you could say. But yeah, I guess we can just start off with we know you're a huge fan of Djokovic. I'd love to know how that started. What's the backstory behind that? Obviously, every fan who has some sort of backstory, so I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, we'll go straight in, really. I mean, my backstory with regards to Djokovic is kind of it relates to kind of what I go on about now. Really, is a lot of it is to do with the false narratives that the Western media portray. And when I first really got into watching tennis was when Djokovic was kind of coming to the fore. So probably 2007. So it was a few years after university, and I was I'd only just started playing tennis as well. So I was starting to play tennis. I had a very similar style to Djokovic, so I was a baseliner. Didn't particularly like coming to the net, and had to kind of work hard to get anywhere in my game. But it was then really when I was watching Djokovic as an 18, 19-year-old. I think it was Miami when he kind of first burst onto the scene in 2007, and he beat kind of Roddick, Nadal, and Federer in the same tournament. And I was like, well, this is just unbelievable, because at that stage, Nadal and Federer were just seen as kind of untouchable, really. And to have this 18-year-old kid come in. So I just thought it was phenomenal. And I saw his interview, and he came across as cheeky and quite funny. And I thought, oh, I really like this guy. How refreshing for the game. And then all I saw in the next few days was articles saying how cocky he was, how arrogant he was. And I was like, well, that's not what I saw, and that's not what I kind of, when I watched him, I didn't feel that way, and that kind of pattern kind of continued, really, and
Right.
I was probably, my initial background was, I'm born and bred in Britain, and I've always been close to British tennis. I've always followed British tennis. So before that, I was a big Henman fan, a big Rosetsky fan, but they were kind of coming to the end of their careers.
Right.
So that was my initial kind of start of Djokovic, in that I always support the underdogs as well. Wherever it be in sport. I'm a Derby County fan, and they're not very good. And everyone will say to me when I first support football, "Why don't you support Man United? Why don't you support Liverpool? Someone who's actually good."
Yeah.
But I always support the underdog, and I saw when Djokovic was coming through, he was very much being positioned as an underdog, as someone that media didn't particularly like. So that kind of gravitated me more towards Djokovic.
Right.
And then as I kind of developed my own tennis, I found myself kind of looking at Djokovic's game and getting inspired by it. So I never had a double-handed backhand before I saw Djokovic, and I was kind of studying his game, and I thought, I really like what he does on court, but I loved his character, off court. And I'm a bit of a cocky chap when it comes to tennis. I wouldn't say I'm arrogant, but I kind of gravitate to the fact that actually this guy has got what I thought was a similar personality to me, and they kind of just developed from that.
Yeah.
And it was probably only about 5 years ago that it became into more of an activist kind of role, because of all of the stuff that was happening. But I'm sure we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, no, and I also feel like, I mean, I feel like you look at all of the greats in the sport, even Federer, Nadal, and like Tiger Woods, like there's all still a cockiness that's needed to be that good. You can't get around,
Absolutely.
like you have to, like when you're at that level, you have to think that you're the best. Like that's part of the mentality. Whether some people look at that as a negative thing, I personally don't. I think that I feel like that's a necessity to be that good in high level sport like that. But yeah, I can relate to you a bit. I really only watched Grand Slam tennis until like a few years ago, and that's why I sort of was very drawn to Alcaraz, just because when I started watching tennis, he was like the guy who was up and coming. He was young. Obviously Alcaraz is a very like exciting play style. Even when he's losing, he finds a way to entertain the crowd. So
Absolutely.
I'm a huge fan of his, and it's fun. I wish I got to, because I always watched the slams until Alcaraz came on the scene. I never really watched the other tournaments. I wish I got to see um more of the years of the big three like battling when they were at their peak. But I sort of I can see why you were so drawn to Alcaraz, especially I mean so drawn to Djokovic, especially at a young age when it's almost too easy to take the side of Federer or Nadal. So yeah.
The,
Absolutely.
the Alcaraz era is upon us. I would say, Pavvy.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that obviously, I talk about a lot. Obviously, I
Yeah.
think, first of all, can I just say that I think Alcaraz is a phenomenal player, and I actually think there's a lot of similarities with
Yeah.
him kind of going up and saying, look, I can beat, all the top guys, and that's what Djokovic was saying 20 years ago. The one thing that I dislike, and it's not about Alcaraz, is just
The
the
pressure.
extreme hype and kind of constant promotion of him when that's all we seemed to hear last year when Djokovic won 3 of the 4 slams. A lot of the media's focus was on how amazing Alcaraz was, and it was almost a kind of way that they knew Djokovic was doing really well, but they didn't want to shine the light on that. They wanted to
Right.
focus on someone, and that's when they introduced the Sinner era, and that's kind of you probably see me on tweet whenever Alcaraz would then lose a match, because as soon as they said that, he then went obviously those several months without
Yeah.
winning a
No, he
tournament.
he had a
It,
rough few
I would ask the
months.
question whether he'd won. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I
no, I
think
was very much mocking the media portrayal of him, not himself, because he seems a really nice kid and a phenomenal player.
yeah, I think that hype definitely hurt him a little bit during that time.
Yeah.
He didn't make it to any finals. I wanted to
No, yeah.
ask, what made you start the PavvyG Twitter and just like become a tennis blogger, writing about Djokovic and all that?
I mean, I think I've said this a few times, but when I first started really listening to tennis and watching tennis, the tennis podcast, which is now obviously one of the biggest podcasts in tennis in the world, was one of the first podcasts that I would listen to regularly, and it kind of quickly got quite a big audience, and I would watch that, and this was a tennis podcast that presented itself on being independent, and it was one for all fans, not just for your Fedels and your Murray fans. It was something that they wanted to do for all fans, and I kind of constantly saw them ignoring Djokovic or putting slants on Djokovic. They did
Yeah.
big kind of shows just on Federer and Nadal. They decided to miss Djokovic, and I would regularly challenge them, and to the point where they didn't really like it because they ended up blocking me from all their platforms, so I couldn't listen to them. And that's why, well, okay, well, I've at that stage, I think I had less than 500 followers, and I thought I really want to kind of put something out there in the tennis Twitter world that can kind of give people some perspective. And this was about, I
Right.
mean, I've had my Twitter account for about 10 years, but I only really started using it proficiently around 2019, and this was the time where Djokovic had kind of come back from his injury. He was then now starting to win slams again. So I found that the establishment, so I speak, is a media very much part of that, really started to turn on
Right.
Djokovic. And this was at the time where Djokovic was the ATP Players Council's leader. And there was all this stuff going off with Justin Gimelstob in the background with his assault case, and a lot of the focus and scrutiny seemed to actually go on Djokovic, not on anyone else, which is unthinkable, because you look at it now, no one even looks at an ATP Players Council leader to what's happening, to a number of things that are happening in tennis. But at that time, they put a lot of pressure, and it was almost felt like it was targeted pressure. So that's when I became more of what probably an activist, really, where I wanted to challenge all of the journalists, try and put a little bit of perspective, a little bit of context, a little bit of truth. And because it kind of went against the narrative, I became a very polarizing figure. You either love me or you hate me. A bit like Marmite, and that's kind of what's happened since. And obviously, the big event was obviously Australia, and that's when I got a huge increase in followers in 2022, and then following Djokovic and how he was treated during the whole of that year. That kind of got me a big following, and it's kind of continued since. So some people are saying, well, we really appreciate you because you speak against what other people won't speak against, and talk about issues that people think are not politically correct or not right. Whereas others are saying, oh, you're toxic, you're lying, and we believe the media, and I get a lot of abuse and a lot of people vilify me. So it's, I think, to answer your question, Jet, just to go back, it's probably last 5 years that I've really kind of become almost like a Djokovic activist. But I don't see myself as that. I just see myself as someone who's trying to put the truth out of there about, yes, I'm not going to lie, he's my number one favorite player. He's my inspiration. He's my role model. I've seen him play many, many times. I've got to know him and the team well over the years. So, I'm not going to lie to say, there probably is going to be a little bias over there. But I do try and present what is the truth. And I would never go out intentionally to put out fake news or say something that isn't. But I do it in a way that I had a little bit of humor as well. And some people don't get that. Some people, sometimes I'm mocking stuff and they don't get my sense of humor. But I always say that's on them, not on me.
So you talk about the establishment. That's a big thing on your Twitter. Like you reference them a lot. So for our viewers who aren't familiar, and so I have a big golf podcast. So I'm sure a lot of So I'm sure a lot of some of the new viewers will actually be golf fans who are just sort of tuning in to see how the podcast is going. And so for viewers who aren't familiar, how would you define the establishment?
There's a number of words for the establishment. I think in the UK, I like to use the establishment. And in America, it might be known as the deep state. Some people call it the Matrix, or some people, have got various different names for it. But what I would say it is it's a set of very, very influential individuals, businesses, organizations that are sponsors of these tennis players. They're sponsors of the tennis tournaments. They bring them out a huge amount of money. And with that money, they expect power and control. And so what happens is that all of these companies then end up owning a lot of the mainstream media companies. So they are then set agendas and are told to do certain things to make sure that they adhere to the establishment. And they don't want to go against it, because if they do, they will lose job opportunities. They will lose income. They don't want to go up against these people because they know they're powerful. And a lot of these people are kind of selfish in a way, and that they will go where the money goes. And the tennis podcast is a prime example of that. If you look at them, they kind of, when they first came onto the scene, it was just David and Catherine. They said they had an idea in a pub and they decided to go out and do a podcast. But what they did is they actually pushed the narrative. They kind of went in line with what the establishment went. And after a year or two, they started getting accreditations to Wimbledon, which is unthinkable. I have a lot of journalist friends, and it takes 5-10 years to get accreditations to Wimbledon. They were fast-tracked. They are then getting sponsors from big tennis organizations, events, because they're happy with the content that they're putting out. The fans are then giving them 100,000. They are now, that's their full-time job now almost. And I think that they've done that because they pushed a narrative and they've got rewarded for that. Whereas people that have gone against the narrative, and I know a lot of friends, I'm not going to name them in the journalists, are losing media opportunities if they're not kind of following what they're expected to say. So that's the big challenge that we face at the moment, and not just in tennis. I mean, we've seen it in golf with Liv, and
there's a bunch of stuff.
there's a whole lot of stuff, and people, at this stage are confused as to kind of who are the good guys and who are the bad guys, or who are just going out to do things for themselves, or who are actually doing things for other people. And one of the reasons I love Djokovic and is the fact that I do think he's selfless and he actually does things for the benefit of others, rather than just for himself.
Yeah.
So we saw in your pinned post on Twitter, it looked like you were sitting right above Djokovic's box, or maybe even in Djokovic's box. How did you manage that, and what was that like?
Yeah, I mean that was surreal. It was in Djokovic's box. It was in 2021, when he won the Wimbledon final. It was the year that there was still kind of COVID restrictions, so a lot of Djokovic's family weren't able to actually come and travel to the UK because of restrictions that were put on due to the pandemic. At that time, I'd kind of got to know the team through my work on social media, and I think they appreciated that I was kind of constantly going on a limb and kind of trying to defend and support him as much as I could, and they also saw that I was getting a lot of abuse for that as well. So I think it was back then 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago that I got in touch with the team, and they got in touch with me, and it was very, very surreal because I don't see myself as a celebrity. I see myself as a normal tennis fan. So for that to happen to me, and for Djokovic to be my role model and for my inspiration was just incredible. And
Yeah.
I still have to kind of pinch myself because growing up, I mentioned obviously Henman and Rusedski were some of my favorites, but my other favorite was also Goran Ivanisevic. And so I was literally sat right behind Goran Ivanisevic in that
That's
final.
so cool.
I could hear him. I could talk to him. I met him. I got to chat with him. So it was literally like a kid for me, having Christmas, because it meant that I meant and was so close to so many of my inspirations and role models. And obviously Djokovic won, and it was
That was the Berrettini
it
era,
was
right?
phenomenal. It was, yeah,
Yeah.
yes, it was. It was the Berrettini one. So it was a tough match as well because he lost the first set, and Berrettini, if
Yeah.
you may remember, he kind of won Queens, and he was just
Yeah.
he was blasting everyone off the grass court that year,
Yeah.
and he took the first set against Djokovic, and
Yeah.
Djokovic really had to dig deep.
Yeah, very very similar to Kyrgios, honestly, the year after when I mean Kyrgios, I wouldn't say he looked like he was gonna win, but at least he looked like he could compete with Djokovic, which a lot of people didn't really know because obviously Kyrgios is such an interesting like figure in the sport, right? Like you look at what his potential is and what he probably could have been if he had approached tennis maybe the way he did in 2022. If he had approached it that way, maybe his career would look a lot different because there's no doubt he has a lot of talent, but I found those two finals actually entertaining because there's some players I feel like that you watch go against Djokovic like Tsitsipas and Rude where you just know they have zero chance.
Yeah.
Just it's like they've already lost mentally before they even go in. It's not that they don't have the talent to upset them. They just mentally I feel like they already lost. So that's at least I mean I think Berrettini's career has sort of fallen off a bit and who knows what's up with Kyrgios, but at least those finals were somewhat drawing
Oh,
because
absolutely.
yeah
I mean,
so is that the
I just want to touch upon Kyrgios because I said at the time I was at that final as well, and it was the best that I've ever seen Nick
oh
Kyrgios play.
yeah
And
for
I've
sure.
been watching Kyrgios play. I watched him play when he was 18 at a local tournament in Nottingham, which is near where I live.
Are you a fan?
And since then, I am a fan. Yeah, I
Okay.
am a fan of Nick Kyrgios, and I've met his mum and his team, and I think they're good people. But again, they're a little bit kind of construed a little bit in the media. But that final that he played was the best that I've ever seen Nick Kyrgios play. And I'm not just saying that because it's Djokovic, but I think he would have beaten anyone other than
Yeah,
Djokovic on grass with
for
that
sure.
performance. And again, he took the first set, and he was moving so well. He was serving huge, and I was genuinely worried that I didn't know how Djokovic was going to turn that round. So yeah,
Yeah.
full credit to Kyrgios. Berrettini, you mentioned, yeah, I think he's not afraid of anyone, but he's been hampered a little bit by injuries. So let's see how he gets on. But yeah, big up to all these people that have that go against him, and there were two great Wimbledon finals for sure.
And before we move on to some of like the other topics, I want to ask, so how many slams have you been to? Have you traveled to any of the other ones?
So I can't tell you how many slams I've been to at Wimbledon, because
Really?
I obviously live in the UK, and I've been going to Wimbledon since I was a teenager.
Yeah.
So I would queue, and stay overnight in the past. So I've always been a kind of a Wimbledon fan, and became
that
more of
makes
a tennis
sense.
fan.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in terms of finals, the only two, I think the finals that I've been to have been the Djokovic's one. So I've been lucky enough to be able to see him play. Before then, it's very, very difficult to get tickets, as you probably know.
Oh yeah.
You're relying on ballots. I've been to the US Open in New York. So this wasn't to see Djokovic. This was actually on a holiday. I actually saw Nadal play and Serena. But I love the experience. I love the buzz of New York, and I've seen Djokovic at Monte Carlo. So I've gone to watch him play at Monte Carlo. And a few events in the UK. I saw him when he was at Eastbourne a few years ago, although he doesn't tend to play many events in the UK now outside of Wimbledon.
Yeah, I've the US Open is on my bucket list as well as Wimbledon. Jet and I have been talking for a while about making a trip some year because it is on my bucket list.
Sounds difficult.
Yeah, it is difficult, especially being from the US. So yeah, I'm actually in school on the West Coast, so I'm actually in Phoenix. So actually Berrettini played like 10 minutes for me like 2 days ago.
Yeah,
I
he
probably
did.
could have gone. But
yeah, absolutely. No, I think it's something that you guys have to do just even once. The buzz of Wimbledon is kind of puts hairs on the back of your neck. It's just a very special. You almost feel like it's home, like it's a tennis home.
Yeah, it's like the Masters essentially of tennis. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So we've seen a lot of your tweets regarding Andy Roddick in the story in Russia. So do you think that's a fabricated story? Like, what are your thoughts on that whole thing?
I think it's 100% fabricated, and I'll tell you exactly why. So Andy Roddick is a prime. I mean, we'll go back to Andy Roddick because before Djokovic came in, we're probably talking about 2004 and 5. Yeah, that's the time where I was really getting into tennis, and Roddick is another player that I looked to, and I thought I really like this guy. I loved his serve. And I even my serve even now that I play is actually modelled on Andy Roddick's serve. So I was a fan of Roddick, and because he kept on getting his ass kicked by Federer, I was always supporting Roddick because he was the underdog, and I was like, I just wanted someone to beat Federer, and I thought Roddick could do it, but more often than not, he didn't, and certainly he didn't in the major finals. So so that was Roddick for me as a player. He then becomes a pundit, and we'll talk back to the tennis podcast. And if you push their agendas and if you follow what they want you to do, you will get rewarded. So Andy Roddick is almost the opposite of what I am on Twitter, even though he's 10 times bigger and has got a huge more following.
Right.
But he is an activist for the establishment. So, he will push and do whatever he thinks he needs to do to push the establishment narratives. He was very, very pro-vaccine. He wanted everyone to get vaccinated. He's very, anti-Putin and very pro-Biden, and he's very kind of liberal and woke, and says the right things, and is the nice guy and be nice and all that bullshit.
He's on TV too.
And he's on TV as well. And the time that with the Russian story is when there was a whole big offensive on, at the time where Putin is this awful person, I don't know if he is or not. I don't know enough about him, but this is all, this is what they're telling us. And then Andy Roddick decides to come up with a story that when he was playing Davis Cup in Russia, he got essentially robbed by a Russian policeman, and he had to give them $300, which in 2006 was a lot of money. And he decided not to tell anybody at the time. even though he was playing in Russia for the first time, it was a Davis Cup event. They had officials from
Yeah.
the USTA. He would have been told and shielded not to go out alone. So he wants us to believe that he went alone in Russia in the middle of a Davis Cup tournament, which had, people were being ferried from hotels to the venues, but he decided to go out. He just happened to have $300 in his pocket. So I don't know what he was intending to do with that money. I don't know where he was going with that, if it's true. He then was approached by a Russian policeman who said, "If you don't, how much money have you got?" And Andy Roddick's like, $300, which I think is bizarre. Give me your money
Who
or I'm going to
carries
arrest you.
$300 cash?
It's insane. And at this point, Andy Roddick he was a Grand Slam winner. He was a world number one. He was known over the world.
Celebrity.
So this policeman is asking this guy, if you don't give me money, I'm going to chuck you in jail. I mean, come on. I mean, and then he doesn't tell anyone. So he's like, okay, well, then he comes back, he plays all the matches. And then 20 years later, when people are trying to make out that all these horrible things are happening in Russia and Putin's this and that, he decides to come up with that story. And I tell you something, when he was questioned with it, he tried to answer a few. He ended up deleting it. So, I just think he knows that it's bullshit. And he we can't prove that. But, I will call it out. And I called him out and he blocked me. Which is, fair enough, because
I was about to ask
because
that.
some people that he blocked me and he doesn't want to be challenged because he knows that I could ask him questions to a number of reasons to why that wasn't reported at the time and what he was doing with $300 and why he was on his own in Russia in a team event when he had officials, he had teammates, and no one can his story. So I just think stuff like that is just bullshit. And John Wertheim's the same. He does the same.
I feel like blocking is like you're admitting of guilt almost.
Yeah.
Like I feel like if you block someone who's trying to argue you, you're just forfeiting the debate in a sense.
Absolutely. And the thing is, I've never been offensive to Andy Roddick on Twitter. I've challenged him. And he doesn't like it. And Martina's the same. She is the female version. Martina Navratilova is the female version of Andy Roddick in that all she does is promote activism. And a lot of it is not even based on facts. It's just based on what she's seen or heard. And a lot of it is not even true. But because she's got a big name and she's got a big following, people were like, oh, Martina said it. It must be true. And Andy's part of that crew. And I just think, 2022 for me was really, really difficult for what Djokovic went through, knowing what Djokovic and his family had to endure. And Andy Roddick and particularly Martina Navratilova. And I'm going to put Renee Stubbs in there because I know Renee doesn't like me speaking about her as well. So I'm going to speak about her as well. They were at the forefront of the people that were putting pressure on Djokovic, on the Australian government for him to be deported. And they knew exactly what they were doing. And I don't care if they deny it or not. I've got all the receipts.
Yeah, that is, there is something to admire about, because I feel like in the sports world now, you have to be so careful with how politically correct you are. And I feel like your just ability to be so like, just speak your mind is like, even something that as much as I try and do it on my page, even I also have to be like aware sometimes that there's some things you can't say because there's some people that you just can't piss off. And it is really cool that you're able to create the connections you do while not holding back ever.
Well,
so
it's mainly thanks to Elon Musk. I was shadow banned for over a year, and
really?
every time I would comment on Twitter, it would come under a label saying that this may be offensive, even though it wasn't. So I was off people's timelines. I was losing followers. People would say, "Hey, I was following you," and all of a sudden, I'm not following you anymore. And they would DM me and say. And this wasn't just one case. Hundreds of people would say that they would automatically just come off following me. I'd go off timelines. I was shadow banned. So it's only really when Elon Musk has come back that the shadow ban was lifted. And I'm now popping up on people's feeds again. And I'm able to get my comments across. But, I'm mindful of what I say is costing me opportunities. I know quite a few people in tennis to say that they would say that you would probably get media opportunities if you weren't quite so outspoken on certain things. But that isn't me, and I would rather be true to myself and call
Yeah.
it for what it is than pander to I'm not in Twitter for a popularity test. I'm in it to try and tell the truth, and if people love that, that's great, but if they don't like it, then it's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see the comments on your page too, and there's always a lot of people that agree with you and support you. So
Oh
there's
yeah, for sure.
no lack of
Yeah.
that for you.
Yeah.
It seems.
No.
Yeah, no, I mean the love overcomes the hate,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
definitely, and yeah, there's a lot of I've met some amazing people on Twitter. I'm not going to lie, and a lot of them, yes, are Djokovic fans, but I've met some great Nadal and Federer fans as well. So for me,
Yeah.
it's not about I don't think every single Djokovic person is amazing. I don't get on with certain Djokovic people, and that's what I try and promote, is that it doesn't matter about what your
Yeah.
views are. It matters on the person themselves. And some of my good friends are big Federer fans, and it doesn't mean that I'm not going to being their friends just because they're big Federer fans, or I just
Right.
automatically assume they're not good people because it's a player that I dislike. Life doesn't work like that, and that's what we kind of have
Exactly.
to go back to, because there's too much black and white at the moment. You either agree with someone or don't, and if you don't, you have to fall out with them, which I think is another ploy of the establishment to divide us all.
Yeah. That's such a great transition, I guess, because I wanted to talk about not only just the big three, but the big four, because one of the like I've been following you for a while on my Spieth Legion account. And the Twitter and the tweet that has stuck out to you the most is your big four rankings on the three surfaces. So before we get into just Federer and Nadal and your respect for them or not or lack thereof, I'd love to hear like your reasoning behind putting Nadal first on clay, but then last on hard court and grass. Because I mean there are
Yeah,
stats to back it up if that's the case you want to take, but I'd love to hear your
yeah.
story.
But I think Nadal as the number one in clay is a no brainer. He's the
Right.
greatest of all time on clay. Phenomenal. I think in his prime, it would be difficult for anyone to even get a set off him, let alone beat him. He is just the way that he moves, his spin. He generates so much topspin and so much slice at the same time that on clay in particular, it's brutal. I've never faced Nadal, but I've heard players. I know some players that have faced him, and they just say that it's literally facing him on clay is impossible because the ball is just swirling around, and there's so much movement on it. And then you've not only got to get the ball back, but then you've got Nadal who's covering every inch of that court. So undoubtedly number one. So what I did, which caused a little bit of controversy, was that I ranked Andy Murray higher on grass and on hard over Nadal.
Yeah.
And I was surprised when people said grass, because everyone was saying, "Oh no, Nadal's better than Murray on the grass." Well, I was like, "Well, hang on," because Murray's won two slams at Wimbledon.
Yeah.
He's also won Queens a number of times. He's
Yeah.
also
I'd also
won
make
a
I,
number
I
of grass court tournaments.
I'd make the argument that I feel like if there's any case, I feel like there's a better case for Murray on grass than on hard court.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was a bit surprised when some people were saying Nadal was better. From what I've seen, I think Murray moves better on grass. He's got a bigger serve than Nadal, which is vital in grass. And
Mhm.
I think he kind of, his results. You could probably say the results are similar. I think Nadal's on two Wimbledons as well, same as Murray. But I think overall Murray has actually won more grass court tournaments. Now the real
Yeah.
controversy was when I ranked Murray higher than Nadal on hard. And part of my reasoning for that was that Andy Murray has been very, very successful at the Australian Open, but he's always kind of lost 5 times to Djokovic in the final. So
Right.
when people say, "Well, yeah, he hasn't got any. He's only got one slam. He's only got one US, and Nadal's got two Australian, and he's got four US or however many he's got," and how can you even say that? But my thinking really was that if Murray was facing anyone other than Djokovic
Yeah.
in those
4, 5.
finals,
Yeah.
he would have won 3, 4, 5. He wasn't that far off. A lot of them were very,
Mhm.
very close matches as well. He
Yeah.
also did really well in the US Open. So I thought he had a really, really good record against the US Open. And a lot of these slams, Nadal missed. because he was injured, or he always conveniently seemed to be injured at a hard court, but seemed to be fine during the clay court, which is yeah, probably just a coincidence. But at least Murray played them all, so I thought it was close. I thought Djokovic was the number one on hard court. I thought Federer was two. I thought Murray was three, and I thought Nadal was four. But I even put Federer ahead of Djokovic on grass. So
What's the
I was
reason?
trying to be as fair as possible. The reasoning for that is Federer on grass, I think, is phenomenal. He's obviously got the most Wimbledon records, but it's not just Wimbledon. He's won Halle at a canter numerous times. And Halle is the warm-up tournament before Wimbledon. He won Queens. He's won a lot of grass court tournaments, and I think at this stage, I think he is a little bit ahead of Djokovic. I think what Djokovic needs to do to surpass Federer, and I think he probably will do it, he needs to get one more Wimbledon for me. So he's not far off. I think if he can get one more Wimbledon, then I would then put him. That will be another record that Djokovic is taken over from Federer.
Do you view Federer and Nadal differently? I guess asking you if you respect them is too easy of a question, but like, do you respect one of them more than the other? Is there a reason you don't like one of them versus you can get behind the other, or is it just the establishment and the way they promoted them?
No, I mean, it's definitely I dislike Federer more. I mean, I need to put it out there that I respect both of them as phenomenal players. Watching Federer and Nadal has been a treat, and it's been in my lifetime. They're both amazing players. They've both got different strengths, and they've been a credit to the sport, and one of the reasons why so many people are watching the sport today. But my disdain kind of is more towards Federer, and that kind of stems from even his younger years. I never once really warmed to Federer. When he was young, I found him to be a little bit cocky, a little bit arrogant, and he had I just didn't warm to him. But then when he got powerful, I don't think he used his position to try and help the lower ranked players, to try and help players that really needed it. I felt he was very much about himself. I know a few people that worked at senior level at the ATP, and they were very much like, and that Federer is all about business. He's about tournaments. He's very much about putting himself forward and doing what's best for him. And I think him, doing the Laver Cup is just a kind of extension of that. So I actually quite like Nadal. Nadal was when I first started touching. He was my second favorite player. I used to love watching him. I think my main angst towards Nadal, when he knew that Djokovic was becoming a serious contender for him to surpass the slam. So around 2019, 2020, I saw a big change in Nadal, where he kind of very much went against Djokovic, and this was also off the court, so he kind of aligned with Federer. They kind of became as one. I felt that the Nike influence probably wanted them to dominate and control things, and obviously Djokovic being Lacoste wasn't part of that plan. And then obviously the biggest reason that I really don't like Nadal was in 2022 in Australia, where I felt he played a very, very pivotal role in getting Djokovic deported. He showed no remorse. He showed no support. He almost like he took pleasure in seeing someone who Djokovic had initially seen him as a friend, and Djokovic has changed his schedules to help Nadal in charity exhibitions, to raise money for Mallorca when they had floods. He's done a lot of things for Nadal, and he was genuinely stunned that that Nadal didn't stand by him or back him up, and this was purely because Nadal was purely obsessed to finish with the most Grand Slams, and he wanted that Australian Open, and he knew with Djokovic out of the scene, he would have an easier route to win that title, and that showed me his real morals, his real inside beliefs, and it just showed him to be not a very nice person that the media portray that he is.
Right. Yeah. And I guess now that the sort of eras are sort of almost passing of the torch, as we now have like Sinner and Alcaraz coming up, do you look at them as currently taking a Djokovic path or a Nadal Federer path? Do you respect them? Who do you think will be better between the two? Um, I'd
I
love
mean,
to
as
get
it
your takes on
stands,
that.
yeah, I mean, as it stands, Sinner and Alcaraz are two phenomenal players, and I think they're both respectful. I've got no issues with any of them. My biggest issue and concern is that they are both under multi-million Nike sponsorships. A lot of Sinner's sponsors are Federer's old sponsors, so we're going to see the same
Mm.
establishment push him. They own a lot of the media, so we're going to see the same media push Sinner and Alcaraz that like they pushed Federer and Nadal. And it's going to be really, really difficult for Sinner and Alcaraz to be their own selves, be genuine. They're going to have to do what the sponsors want them to do, essentially. And that's my concerns for them. That at this stage, they're absolutely fine. And you know, I would probably, in terms of playing ability, I would say that Alcaraz, I feel, has got the more shots. I think he's the more exciting player, and I think he's got a much kind of fun personality compared to Sinner. But Sinner has got that hard work ethos. He's humble. You know, I hear that he trains very, very hard. He's always in the gym. He's always working on the practice court. So he's very humble. He knows he has to work hard. So you know, there are two credits to the game. Don't get me wrong. You know, who do I like out of the two? I like Alcaraz out of the two just because I would rather watch him play than Sinner because I just find Alcaraz's brand of tennis more exciting than Sinner.
Right.
And that's not a disrespect to Sinner. Sinner does everything very, very well. And he's obviously an elite player, but I just find Alcaraz, and it's probably cost him in sometimes because sometimes he probably
Yeah.
plays shots that he
Right.
shouldn't. But I find that as a fan, as a neutral, exciting to watch because I find him a little bit unpredictable in rallies, and I don't know what he's going to do. And I think that's quite exciting. And I you know, I like the fact that he's always got a smile on his face. You know, he's
Yeah.
always smiling, and he's always been respectful of Djokovic to this point. As has Sinner, so I've got no real axe to grinds with either of the players, but I do have axe to grinds with their management and their
Yeah.
PR and their sponsorships. And it's unfortunate because I wish that they weren't sponsored by Nike, but it is what it is. If they were sponsored by Lacoste, for example, I think we would see them being themselves a lot more, and we wouldn't see the overinflation of hype and expectations that we are at the moment. But it is what it is, and you know, Nike are always going to target what they think are going to give them the most money, and at the moment, the most marketable players for them are Sinner and Alcaraz, and they're going to invest heavily in them over the next few years
Right.
and are going to make them into great players, but they also want to be great people, which is what Nike always promote
Did you
because they're
see Sinner's quote about like doing it like the Federer do things the right way? That quote.
oh yeah, it's bullshit. I mean, he's obviously been told to say this, and it's so cringe. I mean, the cringiest bit that
Yeah.
I found in Indian Wells was when they were about to go into battle. They've already got a rivalry. That you know they're pushing for the world #2 ranking. They're going for a big title, and they're there skipping and jumping and laughing, and
Yeah,
it's almost
buddy,
like they're
buddy.
in kindergarten. And it's like you know, no one does that. You know, I play tennis at a amateur level. Some of my closest friends are tennis buddies, but if they play any other team, we want to beat the crap out of each other in the match. You know, we'll shake hands after the match, and that's at amateur level. You know, there's no, you know,
Right.
this is a big final, and you know what the establishment are desperate to show is how nice people are, and they're doing things the right way, and they don't smash rackets. And it's a load of bullshit, and people are scared to call it out, and they call me toxic and vile for calling it out. But it is what it is, and I think people
Yeah.
have to be true to themselves, and then it's cringe. And
Yeah.
you know, tennis is a one-to-one warrior sport. It's like boxing. There's not that many one-to-one elite sports in the world. Tennis is one of them. And when you are in battle with an opponent for 3-4 hours, you are using everything you can psychologically, physically to get one over
Mm-hmm.
on your player. And if you're buddy buddy and oh yeah, it doesn't matter if I win or lose because you're so nice. I just think that's bullshit. I mean, I can't think what Jimmy
Yeah.
Connors and John McEnroe would think of it.
Bad
Yeah.
for the game.
Yeah, we have just a few more points. We don't want to keep you too long.
No
We
worries.
really do appreciate your time. Jet, I
That's
know
fine.
you had a question for him on another topic he's tweeted about before we get
Yeah.
into just final thoughts on Djokovic's rest of the season.
Yeah, there's another player in his 20s that's not as well loved as Alcaraz and Sinner, and that would be Sasha Zverev, who's had some domestic abuse, domestic violence allegations against him over the years. Nothing's been proved innocent till proven guilty. I'm a believer in that. And what are your thoughts on that whole situation and the way the media kind of almost wants to drag him down, and then Ben Rothenberg and his obsession, it seems, with his
It's
very
it's really
yeah,
it's an obsession for sure.
it is an obsession. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, Ben Rothenberg has had many vendettas in tennis. He had a vendetta earlier against Neil Harmon, and him and John Wertheim contrived to get him out of the sport. He then called Doug Adler a racist for when he mentioned guerrilla tactics in a tennis forum. Nothing to do with race whatsoever. Ben Rothenberg called him a racist for it. He ended up being took out of tennis. He hasn't returned. He got very, very poorly as a result. He then had a vendetta against Sasha Zverev because he thought Zverev wasn't behaving as he should during the pandemic. And obviously, Ben Rothenberg is one of the paid activists. And if you do anything against the Corona police, then obviously Ben Rothenberg was going to be after him. So Ben Rothenberg was after him since 2020, probably even before.
Oh, wow.
He then, during lockdown, decides to leave his basement flat in New York and travel to New Jersey to interview Sasha Zverev's ex partner, who on the day that Zverev had just won back-to-back titles for the first time in his life, over 18 months, decided to allege that he was actually a domestic abuser and had done all these things to her, but didn't want to report it to the police, but felt inclined to report it to Ben Rothenberg, who she knew despised Zverev. So Ben Rothenberg, who's a journalist with no domestic violence abuse experience at all, decides to go to an individual's house to interview that person when he's got no experience at all on domestic violence, which in journalism is sending alarm bells ringing straight away, and then produces these interviews, which are and articles which have now been taken down by a court of law to accuse Zverev of a number of mishaps that girlfriend purported him to do. Now, what that then happened was the ATP did a year-long investigation due to the pressure, and they brought in ex Scotland Yard, which I suppose is your equivalent of the FBI. People very, very experienced to do a full investigation. They spent almost a year interviewing people, taking eyewitness accounts, looking at CCTV, and they found absolutely no evidence to substantiate the claims made by Zverev's ex-partner. I think he was dealt unfairly because I am proud to live in a democracy, and I always live by the mantra that if you're accused of something, you are always innocent until you are proven guilty in the court of law.
Right.
Now, Zverev obviously got another case, and now again, I don't know about this case, but I think it's a little bit unusual. Just looking at some of the facts of the case, and again, Zverev and his team are denying all of the allegations made against them, and have now pushed themselves for this to be taken to a court of law, where it will be a full court with a jury, I would imagine, where a decision is going to be made. So until that decision is made, I will treat Zverev. I'm not going to start calling him names and abusing him like a lot of the Be Nice tennis Twitter mob are doing, because we don't know if he is innocent or not, or if he's guilty. At this stage, he is innocent. So I would treat him like an innocent person until he is proven to be guilty, which is the law that we abide by, and that's what happens in a democratic country.
Yeah, and honestly, I couldn't agree more. I mean, you look at the way, um, I mean, say what you want. There will always be people who, even in a way, can express their dislike towards a player because of certain allegations. But just the way Rothenberg approaches it, he does it in such a, he tries he he constantly tries to bring Zverev down. He constantly tries to not like it's one thing to believe it yourself, but he constantly tries to
Make others
skew the
believe.
narrative to get other people to join his side by
Yeah,
literally making him look like the devil for
yeah.
which is
He's a bully. He's a bully.
yeah.
That's what he is.
So and it was funny because didn't he take like a little hiatus from Twitter until this whole Zverev thing came back, and then he came back, and that's when he started like tweeting again. It's just like, don't you have better things to do with your life than sit around and worry about whether Zverev's going to be proven guilty in a court case? Like, like why are you losing sleep over that?
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think his hiatus was due to the fact that he wasn't allowed into certain events, I've heard. So I think he had maybe
Yeah.
a suspension or something, and he's obviously been allowed back in this year. But
Mhm.
that was not an enforced hiatus. He'd like to think that he's writing
Right.
this Tim Pot book about Naomi Osaka and spent all year doing that, but that wasn't the case.
Yeah. And yeah, finally, before we let you go, just want to get your thoughts on Djokovic's rest of the season. I know he's had a recent dip in form. I'd love to get your take on that and how you think he'll bounce back. I mean, he's obviously dropped out of Miami, which is, I think, will be a pretty fun week. Obviously, unfortunate news hearing about Sabalenka, so I assume she's going to drop out as well. That's extremely unfortunate. She's had she can't really catch a break right now, so thoughts are out to her. But still very excited for Miami. But I know that Djokovic, I assume he'll get back going around probably Monte Carlo, right, and Rome, one of the two. So I'd love to get your take on how you think he's going to bounce back on clay. Maybe do you think Nadal is going to do anything at the French and just like the rest of the season as a whole before we wrap this up?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I'm glad you mentioned about Sabalenka's boyfriend. Obviously, the reports were coming through late last night, and I was hoping that it might have been a miscommunication, but it has been confirmed that the boyfriend of her for 3 years, Konstantin Kostatov, I believe, a Belarusian former Belarusian ice hockey international player, has died suddenly in Miami, where he was actually out to support Sabalenka. So, my heartfelt sympathy to his family. The Sabalenka, obviously, she suffered just a few years ago with her father, who was also an ice hockey player, Sergei, who died suddenly at 43, and now her boyfriend has died suddenly at 42. So it's a lot to take in. Sabalenka is still, pretty young and has had to deal with a lot off the court. So my heartfelt sympathy to her and her family and everyone who's been affected by that awful tragedy. Now, with regards to kind of Djokovic's season, I mean, I think there was a lot of expectations. Obviously, last year he said himself was one of his best years ever. He won 3 of the 4 slams. He won the ATP Tour finals. He won Masters. He kind of pretty much did it all last year, and I think everyone kind of expected him to continue that this year. But he struggled in the Australian Open. I know he was suffering with a viral infection for a couple of weeks, so he had fever on and off, and I think Zverev suffered the same towards the end of the tournament. So a few players had it. I think he tried his best, and in the end, it got him to the semi-final. So I think it was a great effort. But beating Sinner the way he was playing was going to be a really, really difficult task. So kudos to Sinner for winning that and winning the tournament. He then spent a few weeks that he needed to with his family. He took a break, he took a holiday, he wasn't really practicing a lot. He kind of went back to Indian Wells, rushed. I don't think he had practiced a lot. I don't think he was particularly conditioned, so I wasn't massively surprised to see him lose early in Indian Wells to a lucky loser, obviously, as well. So Djokovic was, by his own admission, poor, and he just wasn't at the races. Since then, he's decided that he wants to skip Miami, which I think is right because he still isn't conditioned. He still hasn't got that practice underneath his belt. He hasn't been in America for 2 years because they didn't allow him because he wasn't vaccinated. So he's got a lot of sponsor obligations that he's missed in the last couple of years. He's got a lot of friends to catch up with. So I think he's just seen that now. He might as well, make the most of it. He's got no points to defend at Miami, so it's a good time for him to take an extended break, which he is doing. I know that he is fully motivated for the clay court season, so I expect to see him return back to Europe in the next week or so, get back in the gym, get back on court, get onto clay. I expect him to play Monte Carlo and Rome as his two events prior to playing the French Open. I think we will see him kind of improved at Monte Carlo, but I think we'll see a lot more of the Djokovic that we know in Rome, and then he will aim to peak for the French Open. And I think he is going to be one of the favourites to win that event. And then he knows he's got a hectic summer. You know, he's got the Olympics, which he hasn't. You know, he's told everyone that that's a very big priority for him this year. So we know that's a big thing for him. We know that Wimbledon is a very big priority for him this year after missing out last year. And he'll want to defend the US. So he's got quite a few tournaments that he knows are going to be coming up over the next few months. So I think he's just richly trying to get his rest and recovery, and just to make sure that he's mentally rested as opposed to physically, which I think is really important when you are playing at the top end of sport and in finals week in, week out. You have to make sure that you're mentally rested. So so I'm not too concerned at the moment. I still, you know, he's saying he's still motivated, he still wants to play, and he still feels that he's confident to play at the top end of the sport. So I'm excited for the rest of the season. How Nadal will go, I honestly think Nadal is done as an elite athlete. I've been watching his practice videos closely. Someone who plays tennis at an amateur level, I'm watching it closely, his movement. And it's just not kind of where it was a few years ago, and I don't think that is something that he can now change. I think he'll obviously do the best he will do at his French Open, because he will beat players just by his reputation. So, you know, he will lose to players in the early ranks because they think it's Rafa Nadal, and they just will freeze and won't play well.
And Rude talked about that. He's like, the first time I played Nadal on clay, I had already lost before I even went in, because I was like, well, it's Nadal, I have no chance. Even though at that time Rude was probably in a sense peaking on clay in that first and I don't want to say he could have beat him. I mean, he did get bageled, but
he did.
Like he
just looked starstruck. He looked starstruck.
The mentality definitely could have been a lot better there, and I think there is something to say to Sinner and Alcaraz's credit that they have definitely handled that better. I mean, you look at Alcaraz, the way he beat Djokovic and Nadal very early on in his career at, I believe it was it Monte Carlo, was it Rome?
So he beat him. I think he beat Djokovic in Madrid.
Madrid. That's what it was. Yeah, and then he beat Nadal in the same tournament, which was very impressive. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think Nadal. I can't see him winning another slam. I think he might win a few matches. He might make the second week of the French Open, but I think he is pretty much done as an elite competitor at the top end of the sport, which is sad. You know, it's sad. You know, whenever a top player comes towards the end of their game and career, and Murray is the same. It's very sad, because you know they've shared so many amazing moments and given fans across the world so much joy. So it's definitely sad. I'm not going to be gloating about that. I just wish he was a bit more honest with himself and his team, and instead of doing all these practice and training and comeback videos, is just to let's see you in action, and then once you're back winning games regularly on the tour, then you can say you're fully come back. But no one's really interested in watching him beat juniors at the academy or say how amazing he is. They want to see him do it on the real matches.
What he did at Indian Wells with they scheduled him for the night session or whatever, and then pulling out, that was bizarre. I've never seen anything like that.
I've never ever seen it. I mean, he's very close with Larry Ellison, who's obviously the owner of Indian Wells. He was staying with Larry at the time. I've never seen a Masters tournament confirm a player's date and time of their first match before the draw has even been made. And there was thousands of Nadal fans, thousands that were literally clamming for these tickets. And then Nadal to then play an exhibition with Alcaraz. He was 2 points away from beating Alcaraz, and then a day later, couple of days before his match, well, less than 24 hours before his match, he then says he's not ready. So, you know, something doesn't marry up there, because I watched the whole of the exhibition with Alcaraz and he was being interviewed on court. Mary J. Fernandez said, "How are you feeling?" "Absolutely fine. How are you playing?" "I'm actually playing better than I thought." So, you know, he gave no
Yeah.
indication that he was injured. And less than 24 hours before, his excuse was that he wasn't injured, that he just wasn't ready to compete, when he had just competed with Carlos Alcaraz less than 24 hours. And people might say, "Oh, it's an exhibition," but you know, it's, yeah. I mean, I watched the match, and I was thinking Nadal's going to be in. He's going to struggle, but he has, you know, just because he's going to struggle doesn't mean he can let thousands of fans down who have taken time off work, who are paying extortionate amounts on travel and
Right.
and flights, and a lot of them thought it was the last time that he would be playing at Indian Wells. So they really made it
Mhm.
into a big deal. And for him just to 24 hours say, "Oh yeah, actually, I'm not going to be playing," and then 24 hours later puts a picture of him practicing on clay. I mean, come on, have some
Yeah.
sort. I don't know
There-
who's, you know, whether it's PR
yeah. The
team took a
PR's
day
got
off
to be
that day.
better
Yeah, that's unacceptable.
for sure. I actually
Just weird.
I didn't know Djokovic was actually in Miami. I just saw Ollie tweeted that he's at the beaches with his friends and family. So that's pretty cool that he actually is he's still in the US. But yeah, as you said, probably a much deserved break. Uh I think that's all we have. It was a pleasure. Maybe we'll have to have you back if Djokovic wins a slam or something like that in the coming months,
Yeah,
because this was
pleasure.
unbelievable. Um, love talking to you. It's been a blast. This exceeded my expectations, and my expectations were pretty high coming in. A very entertaining tennis fan you are, and there is a lot about your work that I do admire. So I appreciate you speaking your mind. There's definitely something. Well, in my opinion, you can't, even if you disagree, you can't really hate on someone speaking how they feel. If
Admirable
it's
and
how they if
great.
it's how they truly feel, that is something that I can get behind, even if I disagree. Because I mean, there are plenty of things I disagree with you on, but that's part of your aura. You tweet things that are controversial, and just the fact that you do that is pretty cool. That you've made a brand out of it, but we really appreciate your time. You've been an absolute treat for us. And we wish you the best of luck. Wish the best of luck to Djokovic in the coming months. And yeah, I just thank you again so much.
Thanks,
No,
Pavvy.
I mean, I have to thank both of you as well. You know, it's really refreshing for me to see two young kids coming into tennis and wanting to set up a platform and giving people that they know probably wouldn't approve of going on their platform. So you guys have been brave. You know, you're going out there and putting voices out there that may not follow the narrative. So I appreciate and respect you guys for that. Wishing you all the support. I think you guys got a great platform. You speak really well. You good questions, and wish you all the very best. It's you know, it's an interesting industry out there, but I do think in 5 or 10 years, a lot of the mainstream media will simply not be getting the views and hits, and it's going to be what I call citizen journalists, people like you, me, bloggers that are actually going to get more of an influence in tennis,
Yeah,
and you'll get views and you know, all we want to do is get balance and perspective. It doesn't matter if you disagree, but you've got to get both sides of the coin out there. And
exactly.
that's what journalism is about. And you know, it's been compromised in the last few years, and it's important that people like yourselves, you know, are seeing that and are trying to use a platform to create a better debate and a more fair and impartial debate.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again. And we'll be back with another episode probably before uh, Roland Garros. So thank you again. And yeah,
Pleasure,
thank you.
pleasure, guys.
Peace.
Take
Great
care.
day, Pavvy.
Bye.
Peace.